How do you sort out the so-called jargon from real-world practices that work? Do the members of your organization find some business or technology advice utterly confusing? Welcome to Real Talk with Sam Holzman. In this program, we set the record straight, and in terms that business people and technology people can understand. Now, here is your host, Sam Holzman.
Welcome to this edition of Real Talk. Thanks for joining me. This is Sam Holzman, and the topic for today involves the different type of people that are involved in virtually any type of project that you may be involved in. Now, of course, our specialty area is enterprise architecture and business architecture, but it goes beyond that because, if I can use a pretty trite phrase, people are people. And it turns out that there are generally 4 different types of people that you may run into in a project or a program. And what we found is that in most cases, if there are 4 or more people on a project, there's possibly a distribution across all these 4 categories. The other thing we noticed is some of the concerning actions when certain types of these people are actually the head of a project or a program. And we'll get to that in just a moment. So what are these 4 types of people that you may run into? So I've got some names here for you that may help. In other words, categories. The first, risk takers. Love these folks. Love these folks. They adapt to change and lead change without prompting. They say, you know what, we're going to give this a try. It's not only an attitude, but it's a belief that every day we can learn something. They're not held back by their present position or present understanding or knowledge, knowing that, you know, if I don't try something, I really don't know if it may be advantageous to us. Now, of course, we're not talking about fools here. We're talking about people that say, you know what, this makes sense to me. I don't know all the facts. It's not in my comfort zone, but I'm going to take the risk. And to give you an idea, in programs that we've had the privilege of working with, about 15% of the people, that's about it, that we're involved with, have that initial attitude coming into a project. The second group is what we refer to as early adopters. And basically, they're good followers. They're looking at the risk takers that they may respect or give them sort of a lead and say, you know what? Things seem to be going pretty well, and I'm going to jump on board. And that phrase is something that you've heard before. I'm going to get on board on this one. Numbers, about 35% of the people in a project are possibly in that category. So they're just holding back a little bit before they fully commit to something. Now we get to the unfortunate 2 other categories. Please notice that I've prefaced this, unfortunate categories, and there's 2 of these. Sometimes I like to call them late adopters, and there's phrases that may be used that are less comfortable than that. And unfortunately, we find about 35% of the people on a project are in this category, and they have to be convinced, taught, engaged, and informed much more than anyone else, because the attitude is, you know what, here they go again. Whoever they are, here they go again. We can wait this one out, just like we have waited out this one and this one and this one and this one. If we just lie low here, everything is going to work out well. Well, if 35% of your project staff is in this category, you can essentially see what that does to productivity. Well, let's put that group aside for a moment, because the category that is most concerning is what we call cynics. Now, there's a lot of phrases, a lot of names that we can use there, and they can be summed up as follows. Again, being a little direct and harsh on purpose, they're going to try to make sure the project or program fails, because it is in their best interest for the project to fail, to maintain their status or to maintain their position or opinion in the organization. For example, they may be the best firefighters in the organization. Everyone looks at them when there's a crisis. But the best firefighter may not make the best fire chief. And by the way, conversely, the best fire chief may not actually be from the best firefighter group. Now, these cynics are very, very, very dangerous in a project. And sometimes you can't recognize them. And whether they are part of your project or what would be even more uncomfortable, and we have witnessed this, is they're actually the program leader. And a phrase that I like to use, I know it sounds kind of comical, they were voluntold to run this project. They really had no interest in doing it, but they said, you know what, I know better than argue with whoever gave me this assignment, so I'm just going to go through the motions. But my end objective is to make sure that it doesn't happen again, and I'm not the one that is blamed for this failure. I'm just running the project. I'm maliciously or blindly obedient to what I've been told to do. When these people are project manager, it really becomes a problem in the organization. And you can recognize either the cynic or what's even worse, as I mentioned, the cynical project manager by a number of characteristics. And this is very, very important to maintain a healthy and productive work environment, is to identify these people, and we'll suggest at the end of this program what can possibly be done if you're in this type of organization, or for us as outside consultants, what we sometimes need to do, unfortunately, when we see these things. So, what's some signs of this, of a cynic or a cynical project manager? A pessimistic attitude is the first one. Okay. You know what? Just let's go through this. And now, whether a person says this or not, or has this sort of view, isn't the issue. It's a negative outlook. They frequently express doubts about the success of the project during the project. They're resistant to change. This is probably the number one characteristic, not even a pessimistic attitude, but the number one thing is resistance to change. They are not interested in any type of, I'll use the phrase, coaching. They won't be coached. They don't want to be coached. And as a matter of fact, they're resistant coaching. Lack of trust. They don't trust their team members. They're always looking to see the negative sides of what people are doing. They pre-position people based on what they've done before or what they believe is the person's talents or weaknesses, rather than as a project manager or member of the project team to help these people. Poor communications. What do I mean by poor communications? Lots of private meetings that occur, and all of a sudden the person walks into the room and said, I was at another meeting. Had nothing to do with this project. Well, guess what? There's some possibly ulterior things going on. Focus on short-term gains, especially as you know from enterprise and business architecture. The results of a solid business architecture or enterprise architecture don't happen overnight, but they're looking for some immediate feedback. Once again, if you use the phrase firefighter, you see what I'm talking about. This is where they've gained their reputation in the organization. Something that's not immediate in results is something they don't want to do because they're known as a firefighter. They sometimes blame the culture. You know what? We can't do this. Okay. Or they shift the blame to external factors. They find some kind of petty thing that they grab onto to say, you know what? That's not the way we operate. A lack of vision. Once again, can't see farther out because of the things that they've been doing. They focus on task completion, check marks, rather than the overall goal objectives that need to be looked at. Defensive behavior. You see this all the time, too. From a cynical project manager or an individual that's a cynic, okay? They don't publicly question authority. In a lot of cases, they just ignore it. And of course, the authoritative figure lets them get away with it because of their fireperson status. Well, we can't say anything about this individual. Or inconsistent standards. This is the most troubling, especially for a cynical project manager. They have already positioned and come up with beliefs of the talents that they're working with in a project. And therefore, it doesn't matter what this individual is doing. And by the way, it's hard to hide this. People think they can hide this, but the person feeling this knows that no matter what they do, it's going to be less than satisfactory for this individual that's there. So they essentially apply inconsistent standards that are there. All of this essentially leads to decreased morale, reduced productivity, high turnover, and unfortunately sometimes project failure. So what can you do? If you're internal in an organization, and this person may be your supervisor or boss or manager, it really is kind of tough. And we know that. We know that. And as an external consultant, it is very difficult for us on a first engagement to recognize who these people are. And so we all fall into this situation, beware. But first time we get into this, not much we can do. The second time, shame on us, okay? And so sometimes we have to, as the phrase goes, gut it out, okay? And avoid, if possible, that person, that group, or that cynic on your project or program in the future. And we understand sometimes it can't be done. So when all else fails, and you've tried everything reasonable to improve the situation without success, you sort of have to figure out a way to, quote, leave. Now, we're not talking possibly about leaving your company or something like that, but leaving the project. Don't let your frustration get in the way of managing the situation more effectively. Sometimes it is a frustration dealing with these people that are there. But you have to remember that cynical project managers can be damaging to both yourself and, of course, themselves and your career because they are in charge. So what you try to do is to research about future projects where possible to avoid these less than ideal cynics. Now, what about us? What about you folks that are in the consulting community? I know this sounds funny, but this has been one of our attitudes and essentially mantras in our company since the day we began. We don't take bad business once we recognize it. Sometimes, of course, that first time is just that. So, in summary, we've got to remember that we deal with human beings. It's wonderful. And if you can remember those four categories, risk takers, early adapters, late adapters, and cynics, and work with those 50% of the people that are the risk takers or early adapters, and leverage those people, you will be successful, even though there may be other people that are trying their darndest to make sure that you don't succeed, because you will succeed. Because those risk takers and early adapters are recognized once they get through a bunch of the noise. Good luck in the future, and we look forward to hearing about your successes.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Be sure to join your host, Sam Holzman, again for another edition of our program. We'll have more real topics of discussion then.